Yes, my name is Amir, and I'm the founder and CEO of Guidely. And together with me, we have Chris Trani, our guide, who is going to facilitate our integration session post the workshop we did with Dr. Shefali Tabari on Friday evening. I don't know if you all had participated, but it was a pretty powerful and intense workshop. I would love for you guys to drop in the chat. Maybe where are you from? How are you feeling right now? And what the ages of your kids are, if you're willing to do so. Um, and we're gonna spend the next hour together, and I think maybe invite Chris to join. And and I think before we even start, Chris, can you say a few words about your background and what do you do?
I
You've been with us for a long time.
Yeah, I was part of the first,
I know.
whatever, the first the first
I
batch.
think I think we called it the MVP group. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Well, it's really fun to be here. And yeah, I've been lots of things in my life, but regardless of what my jobs or job titles have been, I consider my life's work a conversation coach, because no matter what I did and what industry I worked in and who I worked with, the common thread through everything that I have done in my career and in my personal life is around particularly helping people have hard conversations. Now, some people think that means conflict, but not necessarily. Sometimes hard conversations are just things that feel awkward, things that we feel kind of emotional about, things that feel hard to initiate, like just weird. So it's not just conflict. Hard conversations are anything that we find that we are somehow resisting having. We know we need to have them, but there's something in us that doesn't want to have them. So I've been doing this type of work for a long time, over 30 years. And in addition to that, I have a master's in counseling psychology and lots and lots and lots and lots of training in the realm of conversations and coaching. So that is my work. My work is actually kind of two-sided. I have my conversation coaching, and then I also do mindfulness coaching because I've been a long-term mindfulness student and teacher. And more through the years, those two things are fusing together. A few years ago, when I created my two websites, there was still kind of this oogie feeling about mindfulness. So I didn't include it on the conversation side, but more and more, the clients that come to me are interested in either one or both. And oftentimes, if we do work over time, we end up going down both of those roads, mindfulness and conversations. So that's
Beautiful.
me.
Thank you. Thanks for that. So we interviewed um, Dr. Harville Hendricks and his wife
Yes.
Helen Lacali Hunt. I think three times maybe over the years, and Harville, we became somewhat of friends, and they developed what's called safe conversations,
Yes. Yes.
and
I
it's
got your book.
really yeah. So it's really the Imago method is really something that I've been exposed to probably 20, no, not more than 20, almost 30 years ago, 28 or 29 years ago. And conducting a safe conversation is one of the hardest. Harville says that the hardest thing to do is converse.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I believe that.
So so I'll let you go ahead and start.
All right.
I was trying to make a quick intro so we allow some more people to join, but let's go ahead and start.
Yeah,
Thanks for doing this.
and that's fine. I always believe whoever shows up is exactly who should be showing up. So we know that we're going to have a rich time tonight, and thank you for showing up. I'm impressed looking at the chat, since Amir asked you to put in where you're from and your children's ages. It's kind of cool that we have such a range, all the way from, it looks like 5 years old is the youngest, and maybe mine is the oldest at 41, but we got a 30-year-old in there. And so it's fun that we have a range of ages. And I want to say to begin with that I am not a parenting expert. You just heard me talk about my background. It's conversations. Now, certainly there's a lot of conversations that happen through parenting, and we're going to talk about that. But I just want to be clear, I'm not coming as a parent expert. So just so you know that. But what I have found in my 41 years of parenting is my ability to have conversations with my child, and I'll say more about that in a second, about my child. I sometimes think over the 41 years, when I kind of scan our life together, of like, what are the 10 most important conversations I've had with my child in 40 years? And it's a really powerful exercise. I encourage you to think about doing it. You don't just have to do it with a child. You could do it with anybody in your life. But if you start really pulling out, like, what are the most significant conversations that were really pivotal in something changing? It's often a fun way to do that. So I'll allude to that a little bit later when I talk about my son. So I am going to share some slides. I'm assuming you can see those okay, right, Chandel? So again, very happy you're here. Very, very happy you're here. And I'm showing slides because for two reasons. One is I am a big believer in visual communication. Now, I'm not suggesting that with your kids or with your family that you create a PowerPoint deck to present to them. But you can easily pull out a blank piece of paper. And as you're explaining something or you're talking about something that's going on, write some little notes, draw some icons like, okay, we're over here and we need to be over here. How are we going to get over there? And what I love about employing visual communication is as soon as you start doing that, the other person or people say, well, wait, I see it differently. Well, here, take the pencil. Show me how you see it. And then all of a sudden, the friction is depersonalized because you're both looking at the paper. The problem's on the paper that you're trying to solve. The problem isn't like you are the problem. So I say that, and you can do that with young children as well. It's a really good technique. So I'm a big believer in visual communication. Second reason I'm going to use slides tonight is because what we're talking about tonight, this model that I want to present to you, is very visually oriented. So with that, I want to remind you, if you saw in the integration session, what we're here to do today. We're going to be connecting with chat via chat and maybe breakout rooms. We'll see how many people are here and what the energy is like. We might have 2 or 3 breakout rooms to let you do some sharing in pairs. This is the kind of the highlight, is we're going to learn a simple, memorable, hopefully memorable model that you can use real time in conversations to check in with yourself, to see what's going on. Now, if you heard Amir and I talking before we started the program, we are aware that people don't have the time or maybe the inclination or the energy to learn multi-piece difficult things. So one of my claims to fame as a coach and as a facilitator is finding things that are quick and easy, but work, that people can start using in their life right away. Because I find, even though I've got zillions of books that I can recommend to people on communication, they're not going to read the book. And even if they read the book, they're not going to do what the book says. So I've learned over the years that I need really quick, memorable tips that they are more likely to go out and actually try. Now, what this model will do, and we'll practice it a little bit, is it incorporates a few very simple mindfulness strategies that can enable us to shift to a more conscious state. Dr. Shefali talked about being unconscious. So of course, we want to start learning how to make that shift to a more conscious state. We're always going to end up back in that unconscious state at one time or another. So we need to develop some flexibility of how do I notice where I am now? And how do I shift myself? Sometimes I think about it in the conversational coaching is we need to be like a conversational ninja. We need to have a number of moves like, okay, this is coming at me now. What can I do? Okay, now I need to do this, as opposed to being really rigid and static in a conversation. So this is what we are here to do today. So without further ado, I want to ask you, and I'll stop the share in a second for you to, or no, I guess you can still do chat, right, Chandel? They can still do chat if I'm sharing. Yeah, so I guess I don't have to stop.
Yeah, they can.
So here's what I want. Again, I'm assuming that all of you did go to Dr. Shefali or heard the replay. And she said lots of stuff. So the question I want to pose to you to put in the chat box is, what is a sentence or a phrase or a line that she said that really impacted you? Now, don't put it in the chat box yet, because I've got a special way I want you to do this. So in a moment, I'll ask you to put into chat, just a little snippet. We don't have to write a whole thing. But the way we're going to do this, we call this collaborative journaling, which is a fun thing to do in Zoom in chat. I'm going to, in a second, give you the cue to type in chat, but I don't want you to press enter until I tell you. And then when I tell you, we'll all press enter and we'll see everybody's contributions come up on the screen. And I'm going to give you a time to actually scroll through them and take them in. So hopefully that makes sense. And if you forget and hit the enter button, it's okay. But let's see if we can do this. So again, your question is, what's something, phrase, a word, a sentence, something short that you heard Dr. Shefali say that is still really resonating with you? Put that in the chat, but don't press enter until I tell you. Chandel, did you press enter? It's okay. It happens. We're so used to it, right? Yeah. All right, let's assume everybody else has finished. So go ahead and everybody else hit enter and let's see. Whew. Now you might not be able to read them immediately, but I'm going to give you time to scroll up and down so that you can read everybody's. So let's take a moment to do that. See what people have said. Yeah, not about you, or it is about you, not about your child. Children live from their heart, not their mind. Oh, the myths on the control. Oh, we're going to talk about that tonight. And don't love them too much. I thought that was really powerful that she clarified like how we try to fool ourselves to say we do things out of love when really we have some, I believe she used the word secret agendas. So and Jessica, you said look at you. I'm assuming maybe that means that your child looks at you. You are not how you were raised. That's great. We can change. It's not too late to change. All right. Well, thank you for that. Well, I'm going to show you the one that really stopped me in my tracks. This one. We are all trading authority for connection. Ouch. And maybe authority in some cases, maybe that does sound very parental, but if we wanted to expand this even into other parts of our life, maybe it's not so much authority, but what's that other word that Amir used? We're all trading control for connection. We say we want connection, but really, once we get into the conversation, it seems like we really want control. So we are made to connect. We're human beings. Dr. Shefali reinforced that. We are social beings. We are interdependent beings. We are made to connect. And conversation is one of our greatest tools for connection. And just like Dr. Shefali said about parenting, we never get any training to be a parent, even in conversation and communication. How many people have taken a class or gone and done maybe family therapy or couples therapy? Certainly some, but it's hard to have conversations that are emotional and that trigger us and that sort of thing. And yet we expect that we show up and we can just wing it and figure it out. And we sometimes kind of make a mess out of things. So that's part of why I love doing this work, is to help people build some competence and confidence with at least just a few things that can help make their conversations better. Now, speaking of connection, we all know these signals, right? In some ways, it's kind of helpful because when we're on the internet or when we're on Zoom, or we're on our computer, we get signals to tell us how our connection is. That's helpful because then I know, okay, I'm probably not transmitting well and I need to do something. But when we're with people, the signals are getting mixed. And unfortunately, we don't have some magic hand that shows up and writes in the air. You're getting a connection error. You are not connecting with this human being. It might be great if we could have that, just like we have your internet connection is unstable. Now, staying with that idea of technology just for a second, you probably all have something in your house that looks like this, a modem or a router or whatever they're called. And I like thinking about that because if you look at your modem or your router, right, it's blinking, it's different things are happening. It doesn't just come on and stay static. This is how you know that different things are happening, different things are being transmitted. Well, it turns out that we have our own, let's call them natural communication channels. Doesn't look like the modem, but let's see what these natural communication channels are. We have our body. Our body gives us lots of signals, right? Lots of communication comes through how the body feels physically and emotionally. We have our heart. We have a lot of information coming in through the heart channel, how we're feeling about people, what they're saying, what we're saying to them. And of course, we have the mind, which, good and bad about that. Sometimes that mind can be very helpful and creative and curious, and sometimes that mind can be a little bit of a problem. So I want you to think about this, kind of imagine this like our own little modem or router. And that as we get information and communication coming in, incoming messages, then we have outgoing messages, we start having these things pop up, right? Kind of like the lights on the modem. And maybe more incoming. Now it's going to my mind. Now it's going to my heart. So I like this idea that we have these three parts of us that are flashing. They're getting stimulated. They're getting information coming in, similar to how our modem gets information. So I wish I could claim authorship for this model that I'm going to teach you tonight. These are just a few of my communication books to let you know that I really am serious about this topic. And this model comes from one of my teachers, Susan Gillis Chapman, who's a mindfulness teacher and a marriage and family therapist, who a few years ago wrote this book, The 5 Keys to Mindful Communication. And in the book, she talks about this particular model that we're going to be using tonight. So bowing to Susan for creating something that's so helpful for us. Well, we're going to think about going back to that idea of information coming and going, conversational signals coming and going. Let's now shift metaphors and think about these as traffic signals. What if during our conversation, we actually had something, maybe like this. Whoops. I don't know if you can see it lighting up. What if we actually had sitting right by us something that's telling us, stop, slow down. Okay, green, keep going, right? And again, we don't have that, but we're going to kind of create our own system of doing that. So we're going to think about this tonight as conversational traffic signals. All right. Well, we know what traffic signals are. We deal with those enough in our life. The green light in a conversation is open. Both people, open, sharing, connecting. Traffic is flowing smoothly. While the light is green, we just keep going and enjoying the ride. Now, we know too well the red light. The red light in traffic means stop. The red light in conversations means communication has closed. And if you keep going, just like if you run through a red light, you may crash. So the idea with the red light is you want to get sensitive to notice when this closed positioning is coming in and saying, we need to stop. I need a break. Let's take a moment, whatever we need to do. So those are pretty clear of how we would watch for those signals in a conversation. But what about the yellow light? That in-between phase. Now, most people that I talk to when I say, so what do we know the yellow light means in traffic? Most people say, well, for me, it means speed up and get through quicker. But we know really that the yellow light in traffic is supposed to mean caution. Slow down, look around, don't just speed through. And the same is true for conversational yellow light. And we're going to talk about that. And it turns out in this model that the yellow light is a potent place if you can develop sensitivity to notice it. So let's just go through the lights very quickly from a conversational standpoint. So we already said the green light in conversations means go. Everything's good, let's go. So there's openness, a sense of nowness. We're not so much talking about yesterday, tomorrow, we're like in the moment with each other. I like this one. Your body's present is your mind. So it's sort of like, where are we? We're staying in the present in this conversation. This is a nice one, that the green aspect of conversations, we have this sense of we together, connected, togetherness, on the same page. We all know what that feels like, right? So openness, nowness, we together. So those are some qualities of a green light conversation. Now you might say, oh, so Chris, you're talking about rainbows and unicorns and la, 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 everything is fine. And green light conversations are only about the nice, butterflies and ponies and that sort of thing. No, that is not all that the green conversations are about. It turns out that the green light, even though it looks just plain green on my little traffic light, we might think of it as like a mixing zone. So that what happens in that mixing zone is we can handle tough topics. We can handle differing opinions. We can handle emotions. So I love this. We can, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Let me go backwards. So that we can think of the green as this energetic mixing zone that honors our shared human experience and our interdependence. So just remembering that we are both human, we're both having a human experience here, we're both interdependent on each other. Let's honor that and do our best with tough topics, differing opinions, emotions. Well, the red, again, we said we know that one maybe all too well. The red light is marked by, yes, defensiveness, sort of this visual of the prickly. I know some of you are in Arizona, so this might resonate with you. That kind of pinchy, ouch, you know, like you're doing something to protect yourself, either verbally or physically or whatever. I also think of this as protection of the heart. That when we're defensive, even if it comes out in a very strong, intense way, really, really what we're protecting is our heart, a sense of vulnerability. And we don't want to say that, right? We don't want to say that we're feeling vulnerable, so we just act like we're not. Also, with the mind, I love this visual. Sorry, we're closed. The mind is closed. Not taking in any more ideas here, no more new information, bye-bye. And remember, we said in the green conversation, there's that we together feeling. In a red conversation, it's all about me, 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 me. My needs, my feelings, what I want. You need to listen to me, da, 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 da. Okay. Well, let's visit that yellow light, since we said that one is a little different here. You know, the yellow light is starting to flash when something feels unexpected. So let's say you're having one of those green conversations and you're just like, hey, this is cool. But then all of a sudden you notice yourself sort of like a little cringe or a little twitch. You're not even sure why, but something doesn't feel quite right. You feel unsettled. Did I do something wrong? Did I say something to hurt somebody's feelings? Like, what's going on here? It feels like there's an undercurrent and you can't really pinpoint it. It just feels like all of a sudden something went a little awry in the conversation. You definitely feel uncertain and uncomfortable and unwanted. You start feeling like, I don't know if I should be here. I don't know if I want to stay in this conversation. So those are your early signals. If we can attune to those in a conversation and notice that first little twinge of like, oh, something happened there. That's when we can start attending to the yellow light and really leverage the power of the yellow light. So another way to think of it is we have a fear or an irritation. We're in a conversation, everything is going fine, but then all of a sudden we have a fear or irritation. This is not going as planned. I feel misunderstood now. Okay, so that energy is starting up. Now, with this yellow light, if I'm aware enough, I can use it as a point of choice. All right, I'm feeling misunderstood. Things aren't going as planned. I have a choice here. Am I going to open to this or am I going to close? So similar to the yellow light in traffic. Yellow light, am I going to speed through or am I going to slow down and think about what I want to do? So the key question then you ask, if you can get yourself to slow down, get yourself to notice that first signal, and then say, choice point. Your key question is, what is needed right now? Especially if you've set the intention to be in connection. If I want to get back to connection, what can I do? What can I do right now? That's what I mean by those conversational moves that we talked about. So in summary, if we learn how to slow down and pay attention to the discomfort of self-doubt, confusion, and maybe even fear that comes with the yellow light, it is not comfortable. But if we can see it and stay with it, even though it's uncomfortable for a moment, we find a point of choice. That's the empowerment of the yellow light. Now, going back to our idea about the natural communication system, let's take a look at how this sort of kind of a matrix, if you will, of how this shows up, body, heart, mind, shows up in the different kinds of conversations. So this is kind of getting to know our natural communication system a little bit better. In the green light, remember that's the open, our body feels awake, alert, like, ha, I'm here, I'm present. Our heart feels open. Our mind feels curious. We want to ask questions, we want to learn more. And we have a feeling of like, we're on the same page with our partner. Like, this is cool. We're the same right now. We're in the same lane, if you will. Well, the red light, again, we know all too well. You know you're getting in the red light when the body tenses, shoulders, jaw. Yeah. You start noticing your heart feels guarded. Remember that heart in the cage that I showed you? And your mind, remember the other visual, mind closed for now? In your mind, you start taking on this certainty. I know I'm right. I know how it should be. Okay. So again, these are the kinds of signals that you're watching for. You may just have one or two. You may just be in a conversation, everything's fine, and then all of a sudden you notice tension in the body. Maybe you don't notice so much guarded heart or certain mind, but tension in the body is enough to say, slow down, check in. Okay. So then the yellow, the red, surprise, surprise, feels like this cloud of blame, right? When we come in tense, guarded, and certain, there's usually a tone of blame going on in the conversation. Now, the yellow light, as my other slides indicated, the yellow light is startled. What just happened? My heart just feels a little tender, a little oogie, a little vulnerable. And my mind feels confused. Remember, my mind's asking those questions like, did I say something wrong? Did I misread what they said? Are they mad at me? Like, so you start asking these questions from this state of confusion. And if we stay there for a while, it's not uncommon that we ourselves start feeling shame. What's wrong with me? Why does this always happen to me when I'm in conversations? Why do I always get in these situations that end up like this? What's my problem, right? Very different than blame. Blame in the red is, what's your problem? Shame in the yellow is, what's my problem, right? So what we do, again, when we notice any of these 9 signals, and you may be more sensitive to some than others, if you notice any of them, you can ask this repeating question, what's happening right now? Body tense. Relax the body. What's happening right now? Confused. Slow down. I'm at a yellow light, right? And we could do that for all of these. So it doesn't mean you have to have your scan checking all 9 of them, but there probably are 1 or 2 that, like they say in poker, are your tells, that kind of give away what you're thinking. There's probably 1 or 2 that you have yourself that are your real signals of like, okay, I'm getting into some shaky territory here. Once you ask the question, what's happening right now? Notice it. Body tense. Name it. Body tense. Normalize it. Don't make it a problem. And one of my favorite things I like to say for this is to add the term, of course. My body's tense. I'm feeling nervous. Of course I'm feeling nervous. This is an important conversation. It's okay. So I don't pathologize it and turn it into a problem. I normalize it and say, this is the kind of thing that happens when people are in conversations that are sometimes challenging. And then your conversational move is to go back and say, okay, given my intention was for connection, what's the most important thing I can do right now to try to reestablish that connection? Maybe I just call it what it is and say, it feels like we've had a break in connection. I'd like to see if we can get that back. Maybe it feels like we might need a little bit of a break here. So there's lots and lots of things you can do when you ask yourself, what can I do right now to pause the action and get back to connection? So I know I went through that quickly, but now I want to get to you all and give you a chance to talk about this. So Chandel, this is where it would be great to do some breakouts. And again, there's no magic about the number. It's probably nice to have pairs or trios if possible. But I'd like to give you 10 minutes in breakouts to just share what's resonating with you so far of what you've heard about this model. Now, again, I know that I didn't apply it directly to parenting, but hey, you can see why it would work for parenting. And just, oh, by the way, if you do use this kind of a model at work or at home, even if you don't have the handy dandy little traffic light prop that I have, these work great. I buy these large 2-inch, and you can actually even create it kind of like a little tent card. And as you're having the conversation, people can flip, like if okay, we're good, we're green, and without even having to say anything, somebody can kind of shift to the yellow. And if you're aware enough, you can say, oh, Amir, I see that you've got your yellow light flashing. How can we attend to that? And if you're starting to get defensive, if you think about it, you can show your red light. So you can do fun things with stickers with kids or with families, have stickers available. And I use these actually with business clients as well when they're in tough meetings and nobody really wants to speak up and say that their yellow light is flashing, but they are willing oftentimes to flip their green to yellow so that we can pay attention and say, hey, thanks for letting us know that something's not feeling right for you. So that's one idea. And even just the little tiny, like Office Depot kind of labels. So you can come up with all kinds of different props to use this with kids of all ages or with groups that you work with. Once they understand kind of the basics of what does green mean, what does yellow mean, and what does red mean. So just want to make sure I stuck that in. So I'm going to have you go into the breakout groups for about 10 minutes and just what's resonating with you as you think about what you heard Dr. Shefali say, and now you think, this is kind of an interesting model that could apply nicely to parenting, but to my whole life. Just talk. That's it. Back to the visual. Anything you can do to visually remind yourself of these states, because there's too much going on in the head for us to just like suddenly remember. So use visuals, use props, use things to help you remember where you are and where you want to go. So, all right.
Can I ask a quick question, Chris? So, I love the green, yellow, red, and I've had more than once in my life where either I put a red light and said I can't, no capacity, no, or somebody put for me a red light, um, and um, and that those red lights were not always respected, and and either me or others in a conversation have and I wonder, and it comes back to the question about boundaries, which is maybe one of the biggest topics in parenting. How do you know where to how do you know how to create healthy boundaries, right? So what are your tips for respecting red lights of self and others?
Well, the first obvious is you've got to notice that that's what you're in, because you know how sometimes we're in it, but we can't see it. It's like everybody else can see it, but I can't see it. And even if someone would say to me, oh, it sounds like you're kind of, moving to the red light. I'm not moving at the red light, which is exactly what we're doing. So the first thing is to notice it. The second thing is to be brave enough to acknowledge that that's where you are. Because right away, because we're there, because we're defensive, if someone points it out, we say, that's not true. So if somebody says, gee, you sound kind of defensive, I'm not defensive. What would it be like to say, you sound kind of defensive? Actually, I am feeling a little defensive. I'm having some trouble taking in what you're telling me. So now already I've moved from the red to the yellow, just by acknowledging, you're right. Because as soon as I say, I am feeling kind of defensive, now I'm moving more into that vulnerable heart space. I'm not in that prickly cactus push away place. So that would be one thing, is just notice it, own it, be courageous enough to own it and say, I think maybe I am feeling that way. And then also when someone else is, like you said, people that have just gone past years, really watch that tendency, because again, if we're defensive, we want to keep the conversation going. So even if the other person says, I need a little bit of a break, well, I want to finish this thing tonight, right? You've got to respect. And actually, again, you can move into the yellow light if someone says, I feel like I need a break in this conversation. If you say, I'm so glad you were willing to say that. I'm so glad. Let's do that. Let's do that. As opposed to, we got to get this finished tonight. We got to hash this out tonight. Da, 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 da. So I think, it sounds simple, but you have to stay awake and aware, see what's going on in your body, in your heart, in your mind, call it what it is, be honest about it, and then make your choice about what to do. That's me.
That's great. Very
Right.
helpful. Thank you.
Well, folks, I think we are at our time. I'm so glad you were here. I'm putting into the chat, I hope this link works, but I'm putting into the chat it's just a short article that Susan Chapman wrote about the lights. It's not too much more detail than I gave you, but it's helpful sometimes to have have something to go back to. And you can look her up, Susan Chapman. She's got a lot of different videos on YouTube. Some of the videos, she's a very long time mindfulness Buddhist practitioner. So sometimes the talks that she does get very detailed and, very kind of like in territory that is hard to follow for some of us, including me. But this thing with the lights is just like bingo. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. And so grateful to her for offering it. So glad that you've been here tonight. So very glad. And thank you again to Amir and Chandel for having me. And I love what I do, and I love being in service to people. So if I can be here for anyone, I think Chandel's going to tell you how you could book a free discovery session with me, which is just
already in the chat. And
right.
Chris, this has been a phenomenal, fantastic way to integrate and to take practical tools to embody some of the things Dr. Shefali talked about, and find a particular way to communicate with our kids, and actually not just with our kids. As I thought about it, I said, this is actually not a bad way to communicate with myself. So
yes,
and I'm in the red zone right now. Not a good time to listen to the voice in my head. I gotta, bring down the temperature first
bring
and then
down the
listen to it.
temperature,
So,
turn down that dial. Yeah. So
yeah.
thank you. And that was
And
my goal, is to, and we had such wonderful information from Dr. Shefali, and I wanted people to have something super practical that they could implement immediately. So I hope that's the case.
Perfect. It definitely is the case for me. I really appreciate it. We do have another integration session coming up I think on Wednesday. I think the link is here in the chat.
That will be a good one too. Cynthia Kane, I know Cynthia. I did some classes with her. I'm sure her approach will be quite different than mine, but compatible. She does
Mhm.
have small children, so I'm sure that she's going to have some great tips also from what Dr. Shafali said. So if you can, check Cynthia out. She's a great teacher, a great guide.
Yeah, so we're excited to have her. And we also have a live workshop on Thursday with Coach Dar about bouncing back and resilience and purpose. Highly, highly, highly recommend that. She works with professional athletes at the highest levels, Fortune 500 CEOs. Really a unique opportunity to work with an incredible mindset coach. So highly recommend it as well. Thank you,
Right.
everybody, for joining.